In this tutorial, I'm going to cover basic setup in the CAD and Driver software in order to set up multi-tool support such as your plasma and plate marker for Torchmate tables. So the very first step that I want to cover is going into your tool library inside of your CAD software. What you do need to do is set up a tool specifically for your plate marker. So we go into the machine tool library, and as you can see, I already have a plate marker set up, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and select, let me create a new name for this. We'll call it test. This is very important. You need to make sure that you select a type of plasma. Sure, there is a marker set up in here and an engraver, but you do not want to select those because when you generate the multi-tool code from within the CAD software, it will use different M code definitions depending on the tool that you use. So you have to make sure that you have plasma selected because we're going to be wanting to use M code 50 and 51 for the plate marker in addition to plasma tools. The difference is you want to come in here and you want to change the turret number to 2. Think of this as tool number 2. If you go and look, and then we'll want to change our diameter setting to 0.02. Okay, so now if I were to go ahead and add this, now we have our plasma, which is currently on turret 1 but of type plasma, and our plate marker, which is of type plasma but it is on turret 2. Again, keep it on type plasma, otherwise you'll have problems. So now that we've set that up, all we have to do within this software is go ahead and generate some type of program that we want to execute. So say we want to engrave the center piece and cut out this outer piece. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to highlight the center piece, and let's do machine, create toolpath. I'm going to do an online toolpath because this is my plate marker. Under the basic cut section, select your tool. In this case, I'll select test. The feed rate for that I'm going to set here, otherwise you'll have to set it within the driver software, and that it's just easier here, just do it here. So set your feed rate here to whatever you want. If you want your online tool path to default to this tool and to this feed rate, go ahead and click the change button. I'm not going to do that because this is just a test tool for me, but I do have my plate marker. I will not have any lead ins or lead outs, so I'll go ahead and select OK. And now this outside toolpath, machine, create toolpath, mail, it's going to be my plasma. I am also going to set the feed rate within this program because of the way we're going to export the G code. So let's say I'm going to cut it out of 1/8 inch material. I'm going to cut that at 100 inches a minute. With my lead ins, lead outs, whatever, we'll say OK. I'm going to hide my CAD, I guess you want to call it, and then show my toolpaths only. Now with my toolpath selected, I'll just move this 0.00. I'm going to go up to layout, sequence by list. I just want to make sure that my cut path is correct. I want to do my plate marker type paths first, so I'm going to move this to the front, and then I'll do my plasma second. So now that we have that set up, we'll highlight everything, click on our scissors here, which is our cut tool. That'll bring up this menu. Now typically what I'll do here is I'll just click this machining, which is the scissors again, and we'll be able to export our G code. However, I'm going to actually click on this Start Numeric Control Manager button here, and that'll bring up our G code on the right. And what I want to show you is at the very top you'll notice that we have a T2. That stands for our turret 2, which is our plate marker. And then you'll notice that our feed rate of 40 is inserted here, and then we'll come down here and notice that our M50, our start and stop feed rates, which we're going to cover here in a minute, are also interjected here. If you selected a different tool other than plasma when setting up your plate marker, you may get a different M code here. Notice that after we do the stop feed rate down here, we switch to turret 1 or our plasma, and then we go to the start point, start our plasma at a feed rate of 100 inches a minute, and then we complete our code. So this is what I'm going to save. I'm going to click this machining button over here. We'll call this test. We'll save it and override it. Everything is done in the CAD software. So again, just as a quick summary, you want to go to your tool library. Let me close this out. Machine, tool library, create a tool, make sure it is of type plasma. Where is it? It's right in front of me. Type plasma, make sure you set your diameter 0.02, and then make sure you change your turret number, but it has to be of type plasma. That's it for our CAD software. So now we're going to go into our driver software, and we do have some setups that we need to do here. Now if you were to go to torchmatesupport.com, actually let's just go ahead and do that. Torchmatesupport.com, under this Torchmate driver software. If you go toward the bottom, you'll see a Torchmate multiple tool guide. Somebody at Torchmate told me this was old, and so you cannot necessarily trust everything in here. I think it's a good place to start, but you'll notice the M-code definitions that they're going through here are going to be a little bit different for my setup than what they have. I would recommend you follow my setup just because I ran into problems when I followed their setup specifically, and it's probably because it was for older code, at least according to the person I talked to at Torchmate. So the very first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go to Configuration. Let's go to Tools and Tool Library. You want to make sure that you have your tools set up here and call them something. This description that shows up here is what's going to show up under the tool over here. So call it something useful. Mine's plasma and plate marker. Notice the tool number is 1 and 2. These are turret numbers in the CAD software, and so they correspond one with another, so don't mix those up. So make sure you have your turret numbers in your CAD software pointing to the right number here. So plasma and plate marker. Now I do everything designing inside of my house, and then I export it to a shared drive and connect outside to that shared drive, and then just run everything out on my machine out there. When you go and set this up, you will have to define a tool offset, which is covered in the documentation and will not be covered in this particular tutorial. And when you set the tool offset, this X and Y coordinates will be set. And they are set on my other computer in the garage. However, that information is not stored with the setup file. It is actually stored with the driver file on the machine. And so whatever offset I have out there is not going to be visible here, which is fine for testing purposes. Just be aware that when you go and set that up, you will notice a change there. This is also version 4 of the driver software, 4.0.56 I believe, so if you're running on something earlier, it is possible that you may have to go and set up some other things manually, but if you're using the same version I am, then you can just go ahead and go to programming at this point and look at the M-code definitions. Now this is where I vary from the documentation. I start out with an M-code of 20 and 21 for my plasma on and off. You'll probably already have you may already have that there. I'm just going to leave that where it's at. I like it this way on purpose. In one of my earliest videos of using the plate marker, you'll notice that every time the plate marker dives down to hit the material, that the plasma bobs up and down, and that was because of the previous setup that I had when following the documentation. This works around that issue and prevents the plasma from trying to fire at all, and so I would recommend following this setup. If you have to, pause this video when I go through each of these sections and set yours up, and then resume the video. So anyway, plasma on and off correspond to M codes 20 and 21. Marker on and off are going to be 52 and 53. And Torchmate says you don't need an all off, but I like having it for a safety reason. I have zeros out here on lines 3 and 4. You don't need those for just these two tools. So they say you don't need this, but I like having it, and I'll explain why in a minute. Notice that line 1 is for plasma on and off. Line 2 is for the marker on and off, 1 being on, 0 being off. And then you can set your delays in here. Depending on your table and how everything's set up and the different pressures that you're using, you will need a delay for, well, notice my plasma on and off for my AVHC. I have a 0.1 delay at the beginning and a 1 second delay at a stop. Currently, I believe, out in my garage, and I don't know why it's not here. It must also not be stored in the setup file. I would believe it would be, though. The marker on and off, in my particular case, need about a 0.3 delay for the start and stop. And I figured that out through experimenting. I've moved those up and down, and this seems to be what's working for me. So these will vary for you. Now, the important part of this is, well, the next important part of this is these execute macros defined down here. We're going to do macros 50 and 51. Now, if you remember from the CAD software, when I was showing you the G code, I showed you that there was a 50 start and a 51 stop. And that was the same for all tools. Well, we do a feed rate start or a feed rate stop. The description doesn't matter what you call it, but call it something useful for yourself. Now, if I open this up, and this is where you may want to pause and copy it, this is what I have. If current tool equals 0, this refers to a turret number. Turret number as defined under the CAD software and as defined under your tool library. There is not a 0 defined, so if we don't have any tool defined, we're going to say you don't have any tool defined. If your turret current tool is 1, which is your plasma, then you're going to execute an M20, which is your plasma on. And if you have an AVHC, you execute this code. And I can't tell you what it does without looking it up. This is just for your AVHC though. If your current tool is 2, which is our plate marker, then you're going to execute an M52, which is your marker on. Else, if all else, if you reach some situation that doesn't match this, if you don't have a 0, 1, or 2 and you have something else, then just say you don't have a tool selected. This is the code you need to start it. The stop is very similar, except you're missing the AVHC code in the tool 1, and instead of executing the start commands for the various tools, we're executing stops. So M21 is a stop on the plasma. M53 is a stop on the marker. This is the setup that I have there. Now we need to go to M code execution and make sure that under the automatic execution mode you have full selected. Then you want under full for your feed rate move set 50, at all other times set 51. And this is why they say you don't need anything. This is why they, referring to Torchmate, say you don't need a 59 stop. But I like throwing your 59 in here, execute after motion errors, do an all stop. And I like doing this because I have had situations that I've run into where a tool will fire and keep firing until I go and go to the aux section and turn it off. And I don't want that. I want it to just shut off automatically. So I have an all off. I put the M59 code here. I would recommend doing it. It's up to you. Now the final piece of this is if you go down to programming under import, if you go down to the very bottom right, you have additional G code. Notice you have the start of feature after rapid move. I have an M20. If you remember what my M20 is, that is start plasma. I have end of feature M21. So what this is saying was when I come and import a DXF, not opening G code or anything like that, but when I import an actual DXF and I need to generate G code on the import, then every feature start and stop is going to start and stop with this particular feature, which in this case is plasma, which is the way I've been operating up to this point, which before I ever received a plate marker. Now why don't I use M50 and M51, which are my feed rate stops and starts? Well, I'll show you here in a second. So M20 and M21 is my plasma on and off. If I want to come in here and I want to do a file import DXF and I save this, it'll import it. Again, this is that same screen. And if I double click on my code, notice that I have a start. Move to this point, start M20. Start your plasma. Here's your next code. Here's your feed rate and whatever. That's what I want. And if I hit start, notice, well, that didn't work out the way I expected to. I have to select plasma. Well, that just changes everything. Let me go and change something real quick. So what we're going to do is going to the import section. We're going to change these from M20 to M50 and to M51. We're going to go ahead and re-import this tool. Notice that the additional G code has changed. And we are going to execute a tool start and stop at this point. Instead of doing an M20, which is the plasma start, we'll do the M50, which is going to say base that information based on whatever tool I have selected. So I'm going to hit start, and it's going to execute the plasma code. And it's not necessarily doing the tool pass correctly because I may have exported that wrong. I don't know. I haven't looked at that file in a long time. It was just there. So just again as a quick review, go to Configuration, Programming, M-Code Definitions. 2021 for plasma on and off, 5253 for marker on and off, 59 for an all off. And notice my settings didn't stick here with my delays and changing these line 3 and 4 to nothing because they don't correspond to any tools particularly right now. 0.3, 0.3. Down here in the execute macros we have a 50 and 51. On our starts we have this code. I would recommend again pausing it and copying it if needed. On our stop we have this code. Again, pause and enter this information if you haven't already. Then we go to the M-code execution, make sure we're on full, make sure we're executing 50 and 51. And then again, if you're going to use the 59, go ahead and put it up, execute after motion errors up in this section. And then under your import, under additional G code, edit that. You can do an M50 and an M51. Just realize that when you're using multiple tools, that if you go to start and a tool is not selected that you want to use, then you will end up having to select it. It'll just throw an error at you. Let's go ahead and select none. If I hit start, you'll get no tool selected. Select your tool, and I'm just going to let that reset and go ahead and say start. And I didn't ever set any coordinates or anything. So anyway, this is a basic setup. Going ahead and setting up a tool offset I'll cover in another video. But until then, if you have any questions or anything, let me know. Thanks for watching.